Pause for thought and join in the barking with Darren Rowe on The Mindful Dog.
It is time to talk dogs. Darren Rowe, Mindfulness for Dogs, canine behaviourist, is with us in our Hamilton studios. Morning, Darren.
Good morning, Mel.
It's just, I'm just going to live vicariously for a moment through you, being able to go out and do things in Hamilton at the moment. How does it feel?
It's actually, it's obviously really good, but like you say, obviously there's a lot of people in Auckland that are still locked down, so my sympathy goes out to them guys. But it is a beautiful sunny day in Hamilton, I have to admit.
Glorious. Well, enjoy it. Now, if you've got a question for Darren, 0800 844 747 is a number. A question about your dog's behaviour, need some help addressing. 0800 844 747 or 3920 is the text. Interesting topic you've picked to talk about today, Darren.
I thought you might say that one. Yeah, it's not something I would normally talk about, but because we've been in lockdown and I don't know what it's like in Auckland, but there's been 100,000 more dogs out going for a walk since we've been in lockdown. There's obviously been the horrible downside of having more dogs outside, the poo on the floor.
And what's the story with that? People don't seem to be picking it up as much.
No, and I thought it was just people being lazy, because that's what you'd normally sort of expect, isn't it? People are just being lazy, don't really want to pick up their poo. But I've been speaking to a few people, and it's actually a bit more in depth than that one. So, I won't mention the park in Hamilton, but there's not many parks, so people will understand it. And as you were going down the main sort of entrance, there must have been 10, 15, maybe even more. I mean, I didn't sit and count them, but just dollops of poo everywhere. And I get like the odd one or two when people forget a bag or something like that, but this was people very clearly just saying, I'm not doing it. And it's disgusting, in my opinion. My dogs were then going over there and having to obviously go and experience and explore every lump of poo they could possibly find, so it's quite a distraction for them as well. But I just don't understand why people won't pick up. So, like I said, I did a bit of research and I spoke to a few of my clients and that sort of thing to find out why people do it. And I was quite surprised at the comments that people were saying. For example, that it's more environmentally friendly to leave it on the ground. We'll cover that a little bit later, but that was the biggest one. And I don't want to use plastic bags because they're bad for the environment.
Really?
Yeah. So it's not just people being lazy, it's actually people with a conscience or an environmental conscience that think they're doing the right thing. And so I thought, well, actually there's got to be a bit more to the story, really, isn't there? So let's find out a bit more about, well, is it environmentally friendly to leave it on the ground, or is it environmentally friendly not to use a plastic bag? I certainly don't want to do like that. I don't know what the advert is, I can't remember, but where the guy uses his hat to pick up I certainly don't want to go down those lines.
His beanie, that's right. So how much poo is there actually around then?
Well, I mean, obviously it's not something that anyone's done any studies as far as I'm aware in New Zealand. But,
except there was the woman, or was it the group in Dunedin? Who did some count? They did some for a stage. They collected it over a certain time. I don't think it was any official stats, but it was like they collected a lot.
I'll have to go, and that's a nice little job, isn't it? I'll have to go and do some research on that one. Certainly in the States, they kind of estimate it's about 10 million tonnes of poo every year, dog poo every year. I mean, that's a lot of poo. That's something about if you put it into a football ground, I assume it's American football grounds, it would be, you could do 10 metres high or something like that of a football ground every year.
That's a good visual to have. Thank you for that.
A lot of poo, isn't it? Yeah, sorry. Hopefully no one's having their breakfast this time in the morning.
Wheat bix or something.
But I would imagine comparable in terms of population, and the number of dogs is increasing so much in New Zealand, especially with the lockdowns, that we're probably looking at similar kind of amounts in proportion, definitely. And what do we do with it? That's the thing. Where does it go? If you don't pick up your poo, it is actually illegal, the bylaws and the dog laws, and I think the fines are around $200 to $300, but I don't think I've ever known anybody be fined for not picking up their poo.
I've certainly never heard of anyone getting fined.
I'm sure there is somebody out there, but it's not something that I hear very much of.
I'll tell you what, if anybody has, text us or call us, 0800 844 747.
You don't need to say your name.
No, or text or 3920, exactly, just to see if somebody has been fined for not picking up the dog poo.
Because a deterrent, if there's no deterrent then people are going to, why would people do it, I guess. But one of the biggest things that people have been saying to me is that, especially we're in Cambridge now, so you can't use plastic bags in Cambridge at all for any of the shops. So people don't have those plastic bags. And what people are saying was, if I'm not allowed to use a plastic bag in a shop, then why am I allowed to use it for one use, picking up a dog poo? And I guess that's a fair comment, isn't it, really, if you think about it? If you think about that 10 million tonnes, if all of those 10 million tonnes is in a plastic bag, that's a lot of plastic going to landfill and ending up in our waterways probably, or in the seas, I would guess. So it is quite an interesting topic in that sense, because we need to pick it up, but what do we pick it up with, and what do we do with it?
Well, that's the thing. I hadn't actually given that any thought, but you're right. There's a lot of there's a lot of when you think about it, and especially when you see the bins around the dog parks too, full of plastic bags full of poo.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of countries are now saying that it's actually illegal to use one-use plastic bags, so you can't even get the dog poo bags. What they are doing now is they're putting the compostable bags. So people are thinking, and I thought, well, we're doing the right thing. We're using a compostable poo bag, so we pick it up. But what's happening is they're putting it in the bins, and they all go into landfill. So if you know anything about landfills, and I didn't until like last week when I started looking at this, that they don't really want compostable things in landfill, because then they compost and leach out into the landfill. Everything's all on sort of proper plastic and stuff like that. So when you've got all these compostable bags in a landfill, they're composting really quickly, and then you've got this poo just lying there, leaching into the waterways and everything like that. So it's not actually a very good thing to have a compostable bag in a landfill. So it makes it even harder, doesn't it? So what do you do with it?
Well, what do you do? Do you just leave it there?
Yeah. Well, and that's what people are basically saying. But I'm not going to tell you the right answers here today, but I'll certainly tell you the stories of why you should and why you shouldn't, I guess. But there are some companies out there that do compost, actually take the compostable stuff and the bags, the compostable bags, and actually compost them, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But there's not many in New Zealand. It's mainly in the States, and it's quite experimental in what they're doing, I guess. But if you leave it on the floor, you would think, well, if all the plastic bags are not good for the environment, then yes, leaving it on the floor is a better thing, because it will get washed away, won't it?
Eventually.
And then it's vanished. Yeah. But what we've got to understand is that when we look at dog poo, there's a couple of things we need to think about, right? So it's not like sheep poo or horse poo, where it's digested the once, not so much the horses, but digested the once, yeah? It's actually quite high in nitrogen, quite high in phosphate. It's got I'm going to use the word plethora. I haven't used that for a long time. Plethora of viruses and bacteria and all those kind of things. We've got E. coli, Giardia, Salmonella, gosh, all the different worms, tapeworms, hookworms, parvo potentially, coronavirus potentially, and then there's the zoonotic ones, the cryptosporidiosis and Campylobacter. So all those really, really nasty things, and it's not just, if you think about when you put it, the poo gets put on the floor and then it gets washed away, it's still in the ground. So if you go there and sit and put a blanket down and have your picnic, potentially the bacteria is still there. So it's not just if you pick up a poo and rub it in your face or something like that. Not that you'd ever do that.
Well,
but you never know.
Toddlers, they'll do many things.
Well, actually, that's a good point, isn't it? They just fall over and do all sorts of things. So yeah, so on that side, there's 101 different bacteria in there, and they reckon it's something like, and again, I haven't got the exact figures, but it's something like 23 million bacteria, 1 gram of dog poo. That's a lot of bacteria. Now, bear in mind they're very small, so you'd expect that. But the more dangerous things are about the zoonotic bacteria, and they're the ones that can pass from human to animals, and we know how dangerous that can be with the coronavirus, because that's a zoonotic disease, potentially, yeah. So it is a danger, it is a worry, and if we have the odd bit, then it's not so bad. But when we have loads and loads and loads of it, it becomes a real problem. Okay, think back to your football field, yeah, massive amounts, and that's the amount that were in the bins. I mean, you've only just got to think about how many weren't in the bins and on the floor. It's probably double that, to be fair. 60% of people, I think it is, don't pick up.
That much?
Yeah, something like 60% was. They did a survey again in the States. I'm going to assume human nature is pretty much the same, so we'll be the same in New Zealand.
I'd like to think we're a little bit better than that, but yeah, you never know.
Maybe. I don't know. If you saw the park in Hamilton, you wouldn't think so.
Wow, that's true, and actually the roads at the moment.
Yeah. And in the US, they've actually deemed dog poo as in the same category as a harmful pollutant, so like insecticides and herbicides. That's how bad they see it.
So if you leave it there and it washes down the drains, what happens then?
So we think it's gone then, don't we? It's out of sight, out of mind, I think is the thing that people think. So, but actually what happens is then it doesn't just disappear. Things don't just vanish overnight just because they've had a bit of water on them. It leaches into our waterways, and if it's in our drains, it goes into our water system because it gets filtered, and then we end up kind of drinking it, I guess, in the end. So we're not just getting rid of it. Flushing it down the toilet, it puts a massive burden on the already sort of like lagging sort of systems that we've got in New Zealand. Yeah, so it's actually a really difficult thing to think. Well, what do we do? How do we get rid of it? Because if we leave it on the ground and it washes into our waterways, then it's likely to cause problems in our water for our animals and for our beaches. again, something like, I think it was 2 days worth of dog waste from 100 dogs. If it was left on the ground near a beach, it could close the beach down and any waterway within about 20 kilometres. That's how bad the pollutants and viruses and things could be.
Wow.
It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. It's a lot bigger than what I would have expected. I would have thought putting it down the toilet was a good idea, but I mean, they can't even deal with the human waste, can they?
It's probably one of the better ideas, but if you think about it, the bacteria that are in dogs are way sort of stronger, worse, I guess, than the human ones. That's my take on what I've read anyway. So the processes would need to change to do that. But probably a better option than leaving it on the floor. At least you know where it's going to the right place to be processed. So it's actually quite. I thought when I started to look at this one, it was a bit of a joke actually when I started it, thinking about the poo. But actually, the more I got into it, it's actually quite a strong research thing that I think people need to be looking at in New Zealand. How do we get rid of this? Because it's only going to get worse with so many dogs, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and more people are getting dogs. We know this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we in certain countries they've come up with some really cool ways of doing it. We've got time before the break, but basically you can get tracked and fined for not picking up your dog poo, even if you're not seen doing it in Israel and Ireland, okay, and I'm sure there are lots of other countries as well. And what they're doing is they're using DNA profiling.
Oh my goodness, this sounds extreme.
They're typing your dog. So when you register your dog or you get a dog, you have to voluntarily offer a saliva sample so they can DNA profile it. And then when they're going through the streets and they're picking up poo, they'll take a sample of that and they'll DNA test it. And if it matches your dog, then there's up to a $5,000 fine in Ireland for that.
Whose job is it to go and take the samples of the poo? That would be at the bottom rung. That would be your entry-level job, wouldn't it? What do you do? I go and test all the dog poos around the park.
Can you imagine it? It's one for your CV for sure.
That would be, you'd earn your money there.
But can you imagine? I think I actually think that's a really good idea, and I reckon that's something that New Zealand should take on board as well, because we're into DNA profiling now with all the coronavirus profiling of the DNA of viruses and stuff.
Yeah, you're right, and it actually shows what a big problem it must be overseas for them to take it to that level. Right, we better take a quick break. 0800 844 747 is the number to call if you have a question for Darren about your dog, about their behaviour. 0800 844 747.
It's the Sunday Cafe with Mel Homer on Magic Talk.
So we're talking dog poo, but if you have a question about your pooch for Darren Rowe, 0800 844 747 is the number. Flynn suggested, well, what about wrapping it in newspaper and taking it home? Would that be any good?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously anything that's not plastic is always a benefit, isn't it? But it's what you do with it after that. What do you do with it when you do take it home? And I think that's the main problem. The covering is important, but it's what we do with it once we've taken it home.
So many things to think about, poo. Let's get into that in a moment. There have been some texts come through with some questions. We have a Taco Terrier, a Chihuahua miniature foxy, who has just started digging in the backyard. Is there any way to discourage this, asks Jeremy.
Oh, gosh, there's all sorts of things out there, isn't there? I've seen on the internet, I don't recommend this, but I've seen on the internet that you put their poo in their holes. That doesn't work, by the way. What it does actually do is encourage them to eat their poo, which isn't good.
Good times.
We don't want that one. That's definitely not good. The best thing to do with a dog, especially first of all, digging is a natural thing for dogs to do. And if you think about dogs, we end up taking away all of their natural behaviours because we don't like them. But actually, they're quite beneficial for the dog and they stop the dog from getting stressed. So rather than thinking about taking it away, think about giving it a place to do it. And that way you're going to be allowing the dog to do the natural instincts and not get stressed out because they can't. And then you're not going to get frustrated and wound up because they're doing it in the wrong place. So actually give them a place and encourage them to dig in a particular place. Bury toys and things and treats in. Obviously not make sure they're dry treats, but bury them in the ground. Even a sandpit. And we give our dogs a little sandpit and we bury things in there quite often. And then they go in there and dig that. But they don't tend to dig very all over the place. So that's a better thing. Rather than try and take it away, sort of give it a place to actually do it properly. Because I doubt you're going to get rid of a foxy digging. It's quite a hard one.
Another question. We have a 5-month-old toy poodle who constantly barks outside the door when we are in. How do we stop this, please?
So again, you got to think about what's the reason why they're doing it. So it's obviously quite a sociable dog. It wants to be with you. So that's what I would call attention barking. The only real way around that is to either make the place outside really valuable for the dog, and that's playing with toys, lots of treats, maybe feed it out there so that they have more value for being outside than inside, or just ignoring that behaviour so that you drain the value of that sort of the barking out. Because if you think about it, if every time they bark, you look at them, touch them, tell them off, then you're just rewarding that behaviour because they're getting attention. So it is a bit of a pain. You have to either ignore it and just let the barking just carry on until it drains itself out, or go and make the outside even more valuable. If it's really bad and you've got council complaints and things, get a trainer in to help you.
Right, I was about to say, if the neighbours are getting less fond of you. Another question we have taken on a 1-year-old bull terrier cross, we think with a staffy. At present, we cannot let him be loose. When we take him for walks, at times he can be good, other times he goes crazy. When he wants to play, he plays rough and he nips. What can we do to be able to train him?
So if he's a 1-year-old, if you've just taken him on as one, it just depends on what his life was before that. So if he's been really well socialised, which I'm guessing he probably hasn't, if he's quite over the top, really it's about you. Gosh, it's a hard one really, because he's going to end up hurting some of the dog if he's biting really hard. So I wouldn't let him practice those behaviours. I certainly wouldn't let him be running off lead, going crazy, because you're not going to be able to stop him. I would be giving him short bursts of play, then bringing him back on the lead, short bursts of play, bringing him back on the lead. You actually have to teach him how to behave when he's playing. If you just let him keep playing and playing, he's just going to get higher and more excited, and then that switch won't turn off, and then he's just going to do something stupid. Probably what will happen is he'll get nobbled by another dog, and then he'll end up becoming the bully, effectively. Yeah. So lots of control, lots of focus. Go to an obedience class. Get him into an obedience class and start doing regular training with him. That's what I would be doing.
Okay. I'm not sure where that text has come from. If they're from Auckland, you might have to wait for that for a little bit longer.
True,
a text in from Invercargill. I am proud in Invercargill. I can go to the doggy park or out walking. Everyone picks up their dog poo.
Awesome.
Good dog owners. Our streets are dog poo clean. And
fantastic.
That's good. You're frowned upon if you don't do it. Excellent stuff.
So you should be, shouldn't you?
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Go Invercargill. If you do have a question for Darren, 0800 844 747, question about your dog's behaviour, or 3920 as a text, about 5 more minutes or so to get them in. So let's get back to dog poo. You've caused a slight panic amongst us all, thinking, well, how much is there, and what do we actually do with it? If we thought we were being good by picking it up, you say some people aren't picking their dog poo up because they feel it's more environmentally friendly than using the plastic bags or whatever. So what do we do with it?
So I think we've got limited choices here, really, unless apart from down in the South Island you were saying earlier. But pretty much the best option when I've spoken to the council is in the bin bags. So to put it in the bin bag so it goes to landfill. That was what I was told anyway. But what we should be looking at is that more environmentally friendly ideas, and again, the States is leading the way. So the States, particularly in Canada, more so actually than the States, they're trialling compostable, so digesters they call them. So they actually put the poo in the big vat and it gets digested by anaerobic bacteria and then produces energy. So it's actually a way of producing energy, which is, if we think about it, we're actually doing it. I don't know if we're doing it in New Zealand, we probably are, but we're taking the waste from cows and digesting it and producing methane.
Right, of course.
And that goes into the gas thing.
So how's your town powered? Oh, it's on dog poo.
We can do exactly the same with dog poo. And there's a place in San Francisco, where they're planning, and they may have done it by now, building a big digester underneath the actual dog park so that you just drop it in straight away. Wouldn't that be great?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's in I think it was Toronto, in Toronto, a place called Gilbert, where they've actually got bins and the council collect the dog poo to put it in that digester now. So the technology's out there.
That is a good idea.
We just need to catch up.
We do. Hey, we've got a couple of questions here. I think we better get to them before we head to the news. We'll have time. So let's start with Gary. Gary, morning. You are on with... No, Gary's not on yet. There we are.
Yep.
Gary's on now.
Gary.
Yes, we got you, Gary. You're on with Darren.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning, Gary.
A big shout out to the Tron.
Yes.
May there be... Oh, there's a lot of dog poop around on the footpaths, mate.
There is, isn't there?
You not.
It's really bad, isn't it?
Well, you would think they would just sweep it aside, but they don't.
No.
They're too lazy to even do that.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say a big shout out to Jack. And Jack was a dog I used to walk, and he had to be put down in the middle of, a couple of weeks ago now.
Oh,
I used to walk him.
Sorry to hear that.
He was well, see, I can't remember the exact breed he was, but I pick him as a pit bull cross.
Mm-hmm.
But what an amazing dog.
Yeah, definitely.
He got rescued he was an ex-pig dog. He used to be a pig dog, and my friend rescued him and flipped him, from a really bad dog into one that would love you to bits.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I don't know how she did it, but she did it.
It shows you how amazing dogs can be, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Mm. And he trusted everybody that walked in, she trusted me to take him for a walk, and it was such a pleasure. It really was.
Quite often, sometimes we get that 1 in a million dog. I had one many years ago, an Irish setter, and they're just amazing. And you just always remember them. Don't ever forget them.
You get that special friend. Hey, Gary, thanks for your call.
Thanks, Gary.
Claire, good morning to you.
Oh, good morning.
Claire.
I'll be quick. I've got a 11-month-old lab Hunterway who we've had from birth, basically, 6 weeks. She has had her first period where we kept her away from other dogs for about 3 weeks or so. Yep. Now we've got COVID, to take her out to these dog parks, she's almost become quite aggressive and antisocial because she was not mixing with other dogs for so long. She's also become very possessive with my husband, who's with her all day. Yeah. And, if he starts to show another dog attention or play, she jumps up and blocks it.
Yeah, that's actually
Any ideas?
It's actually quite common. I'm seeing that quite a lot, and it's because the norms have changed. I talked about it the same last year as well, but because the norms have changed, that they're actually now used to having you there, and then suddenly you become quite valuable to them because you're normally there. It will disappear. It will extinguish itself later, hopefully, unless they've got a bit of resource guarding before that, and then it might come out a bit stronger. But what I would do is I'm trying to recommend that people, when they go to the dog parks, don't just throw your dogs in and give them an hour in a dog park. Ease them in gently, because again, they're used to suddenly having just you, and then suddenly now they're being thrown in a dog park.
She used to go up there regularly and loved it.
Yeah, but that was then.
And this behaviour's changed just since the last couple of months, I guess.
And because if you think about it, her whole world has suddenly changed overnight, and she doesn't know it's not her fault, kind of thing. So the whole world has changed for her. So those normal patterns that she had have changed, and that can make anxiety and make dogs quite anxious. So ease them back in gently into their old routines, and then you'll be fine. If you find that it's getting worse because you've got potential aggression, it's probably more frustration than anything, I'm guessing. But if you have got aggression, then do get yourself someone to help you. Definitely, if you feel it's getting worse. In terms of your husband, probably when you'll go back to work, you'll find that will just start to disappear anyway, because the value will disappear. But yeah, keep an eye on it. Definitely, and get someone to help you if you need to. It's a bit of a hard one to give too much advice over the phone.
Good luck. Now, just finally, before we go to Darren, it's the anniversary, obviously, of 9/11 today. Do you remember where you were when you heard the news?
I do, actually, and the only reason was because I had just slipped a disc in my back. So I was actually flat out on my back at home, and I worked for Morgan Stanley at the time, so it was quite something that I knew. I potentially knew people in the towers. So so I do remember it, and I remember watching the news as it was happening, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. In fact, I didn't believe what I was seeing.
No, I think no one actually did. Hey, thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy your freedom in Hamilton, your level 2-ness, and I'm not jealous at all.
Get my dog bags and pick up some poo.
Yeah. Go and be that guy. Go and count the poos, or go and weigh them. That's it. Yeah, or DNA test them. Hey, thanks so much, Darren. Really appreciate it. And if you want more from Darren, you can go to Mindfulness for Dogs on Facebook or our website as well, and check out what's happening there.
You've been listening to Darren Rowe on The Mindful Dog, giving our canine friends a voice throughout the world. To find out more about what we do, visit our website at www.mindfulnessfordogs.com.